Hi, this is Emily,
And this is Helen.
presenting you
Hello Audio,
where every 2 weeks,
we are showing you the best entrepreneurs for music, audio, and tech.
and a huge thanks to Tamara, who is producing this podcast for us.
Hello Audio by The Venue Berlin.
Hello and welcome to our new episode of Hello Audio. Today we'll be discussing the topic of mental health and digitization. We did organize a live panel around this topic, but before kicking in with this, I would like to quote some findings of the Can Music Make You Sick report by Help Musicians UK. 71.1% of all respondents believed they had experienced panic attacks and/or high levels of anxiety. 68.5% reported they had experienced depression. Digitization has dramatically changed the way we work and how musicians produce music as well as distribute it. The process of music production has been democratized. Everyone can produce content much easier and faster. This might lead to more competition and to less visibility for each individual in consequence. Do artists always need to be visible on all platforms? What are the consequences of digitization? Is mental health linked to it, or is mental health just a general issue? In our panel, we had experts from the field of psychology, motivation coaching, and the classic music industry who explained further.
Hi, I'm Noura. I work in electronic music since more than almost 20 years. And at the moment, I'm running my own artist and label management agency, and so I work with artists, mostly DJs.
Hi, my name is Mira, and I've been working in health industry since early 2000. And that went from physical pain to then working with emotional pain. And I'm a coach and a counsellor, and now, I have my own company with my husband, The Mind Takeaway, where we try to help individuals and also people working in organizations, teams, to improve their mental health and state of mind.
Hi, I'm Peter Griffith. I actually work with Mira. I'm co-founder of the business we have called The Mind Takeaway. I've had a music career and I've been in and out of the music industry for nearly 30 years, I guess. It's a long time. Nowadays, I'm a creative coach, so I'm looking to always help and point musicians or any creatives for that matter, and especially younger generation, around removing mental blocks and just being able to approach creativity without any fear attached to it, really. Yeah, that's it.
Hi, my name is Noura Labani. I'm a music journalist from Berlin. I work for Musikexpress, which is just around the corner at the end of the hall. The topic of music and mental health was brought to my attention last year, as it was probably for most people here, by Avicii's suicide and the discussion that kind of evolved after it, also in journalism. And so I had the feeling like it's been one of the most crucial pop issues of 2018, and I've written 2 pieces about it and done some interviews on it. And I found that it needed to be brought to a broader attention.
Hi, my name is Franziska. I used to work in a really stressful music industry job for 10 years with artists and in events. And I stepped out about 2 years ago to become a yoga teacher. And now I'm also studying to become a nutritionist. And I'm now coaching people, especially from the creative industry and artists who are going through the times that I had to go through, difficult times, especially with mental health, with also diet and nutrition, and just helping them to get more balance in life.
Great, thank you all. You guys all have been in the industry for so long, especially Franzi, Peter, and Noura. Maybe you can tell us what has changed in your opinion the most lately in the industry, also considering digitization, or is it even a big topic there? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, a lot has changed for sure. I think that the most stressful part for me and also for the artists I work with is the constant need for content. And it doesn't necessarily mean tracks or music, but basically you have to feed your social media. You have to, there's just one platform that's I don't know how many platforms. Every platform needs to have a different way of addressing your audience. Every promoter wants to have a podcast when you go play. Everybody wants to have an interview. And on top of that, you're supposed to be creative and have a creative output as well. If I think back of when I started, there was putting out a record, and then you would have a PR agent, you would do some interviews like in a block of 2 weeks or something, and then that was it basically. And there was not much more asked from the artist. And now it's like every day, put a playlist for Spotify, do an interview for that. New stuff coming also all the time, and you have to figure out, okay, what are the important platforms? Where do I need to spend time on? Yeah.
Another aspect of it as well is actually making music. I've been an electronic musician since around 1990, and the technology, although it's amazing, back in the 90s, I was using a sampler the size of a house, and now it's, it went digital, and then it went back to hardware and modular and all these different things. So in many ways, it's amazing, right? There's so much technology, but also that's an overwhelming thing, because as someone new coming into this, you can just get completely overwhelmed, and also you can spend most of your life, which I did, for nearly 10 years, buying equipment, learning how to use it, and a lot of the times not really using it as it should have been used, and actually overwhelming myself. Whereas most artists, when they started out in the 90s, the ones I look up to, people like Richie Hawtin, for example, they had a few choice machines and they learned them very deeply. And then, they did things that people didn't think were possible with them. So I guess it's less is more, with this technology, although it can do amazing things, you kind of need to put the brakes on a bit.
So you feel like the technology is rather a burden than is actually helping you, because it feels like the new technology is also there to democratize the music production process as well.
I think there's many benefits, of course, but you've just got to, get to learn a few bits of equipment. If you're starting off, the only thing I would say is just learn your equipment really well. And again, it's the whole social media thing. Look at me, I've just bought a new synthesizer, and look at me, I've just bought the latest Electron box or this, that, and the other. But actually, it detracts from making music, right? But on the offside, it's amazing, what you can do nowadays. You can buy an FX pedal with 80 algorithms on, which can literally, you can play live with it forever. I don't know, I just think there's many benefits to having this technology, but how do you rein yourself in? I think that's the biggest question. How do you stop yourself from burning out and spending all the time on social media, putting pictures on Instagram, as opposed to actually making music?
Yeah, and I think what, it all has become so like a machine, like almost automated. The way we expect as management, as agents, and we also need to do our job. Or, not anymore. But, so of course we expect this output from the artist, but on the other hand, real creative people are very different species. Most creative people are very highly sensitive, and it's almost a clash, I find. So someone who is working in a very productive, organized, structured, artists are pretty different, but as managers, we function usually the people who are good at their job are in this really structured mindset, and then you work with artists who are quite the opposite, and that can lead to overwhelm, and that can be really difficult, I think, for the artist to fulfill that expectation.
It's quite funny that you just said machine-like way, because Laura, you wrote an article about this. I think you called it the human machine in the industry. Was there anything that surprised you or very striking that you found during your research?
Yeah, I think it was the headline. I said it was the human machine, from the Kraftwerk song. I think what surprised me most was the negative reaction I got somehow for the article when I posted it on Facebook. It was one of our most read articles in January. I think we had 30,000 clicks or something, which was really good. So people seem to be genuinely very interested in the topic. But I wrote about that, this kind of glorified picture of the suffering artist, and that you need to suffer in order to make art, is so stuck in our heads in a way that it's really glorified. And I wrote this in my article, and then in the comment section, people said like, oh yeah, now rock stars like Led Zeppelin are gonna read this and they're gonna laugh, because how can you be so petty in a way and like cry because you have a dream job, you earn millions of money, and how can they still be unhappy in a way? Like, people weren't really believing that this is thing. So I think more the reactions to it, that this topic is still so stigmatized in a way, that shocked me most, I think.
So did you rather get the feedback from the broad audience, or also bad feedback from the music industry itself?
No, I think within the music industry there you could really see, like, there were lots of panels last year in summer on the festivals, and it seemed like it was a really big topic, and people were really, it seemed like people were also really happy that they could finally talk about it in public, that it was somehow accepted. I think it was more like from people who just see it from the outside, and then they think, okay, I have to work as well, and I don't complain. Like, they don't really see that it's very demanding, and also like physically as well as mentally a very challenging job in a way.
Mira, you talk a lot with artists who are suffering. Are there any patterns that you can see, like things that come again and again, and or situations that trigger a bad mental situation?
Well, our perception of reality, all of us, it's very different, and that's why people that are not in music industry can't understand people who are in music industry. And we don't really spend much time trying to understand. We just go on with our life. But what's common to everyone, and it's not just artists or people in music industry or any other industry, is that it's a huge amount of mental stress that we are dealing with, and that changes our perception of reality. And then we start to struggle, and we get stuck, and we just don't see the way out in that moment. And that stress can be caused by anything. It can be caused by a negative comment on something that you posted on Facebook. And it's not the comment that it's causing you stress, but you're thinking about that comment. And then you just spiral and spiral and spiral. It can happen to anyone. And that's what I see as a common to every human being. But artists and people that are out on the light, they're more exposed, so you're more likely to feel more vulnerable or more often when you're exposed. So it could be on social media, it can be,
So you think one of the biggest issues is social media?
No. One of the biggest issues is that we don't know how we create our experience of life. We don't know where our stress comes from. But the social media has amplified it. All insecurities that you might have had, or all negative self-talk that you might have had, is just amplified now.
So what do you usually tell your clients when they come to you with those issues?
Well, the first thing that I like to tell them is that they're absolutely okay. And yeah, the other thing is that we think we are not. When we are struggling, we think that there's something wrong with us. But there isn't. It makes me quite emotional to say this, because it's really touching when a person sees that they are absolutely okay, regardless of what they are struggling with.
Peter and Franzi, you both had a lot of pressure before as well, and you changed your life a bit, like you both became coaches. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that experience and what made you change your mind and your situation?
The thing is, when you start working with famous people, in the beginning it's really exciting and huge opportunity, of course, and you learn a lot, and it's cool. I mean, it's cool to be on festivals and be on the stage and be the important person, and hang out with the artists and stuff. But after 10 years, or the process started probably after like 8.5 years. It just becomes a bit shallow, I guess. And I'm sure that's also what a lot of the artists experience, actually, when they question their job and what they do. For me, especially, seeing where the world is today, I would say, seeing the problems that people face, I just found there's more important things to talk about. And I was just looking for deeper conversation and more something with a bit more meaning, where we can actually connect on a human level rather than on this very superficial. What I noticed since I started doing this work, it's really quite touching and quite almost shocking also at times to see how people that I've known for years, and I thought they're fine, like they're leading a huge company, or they're like have an impressive career, and then you just ask some questions, and it turns out they're actually not okay at all.
Do you feel like people are slowly becoming more open to talk about it?
Yeah, definitely. There's a huge movement now, especially I think Avicii was a little bit the breaking point. So
you're nodding, Peter. Did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, I would agree. We were just talking before we went live, right? That as humans, with all this amazing technology around us, we've actually forgot to be human. This whole thing, we're built to be connected to everyone else. And actually, when you sit down and have a normal conversation with a friend or someone you haven't been with for a while, you forget, oh, wow. But we're connecting with them usually on Facebook, on messaging. And as a musician, I think the segue for me into coaching was seeing one of my fellow band members completely destroying himself through alcohol, through drugs. And we were chatting before that I was meant to do a label showcase, and we missed the sound check. We really messed it up, and I thought my life was over at that point. This was like 2005. And I spent the day just before I was meant to do the performance, or I thought the performance of my life, to only find a band member who was completely fogged up and, to be fair, could not professionally perform. So I had to go and do the label showcase, and we completely made a disaster of it, And I think what got me curious was, how can you get like that, and why did me especially, because I was trying to be the dad of the band at the time, and we were touring. I was also doing a lot of events myself as a DJ, as a solo act. So I was kind of burnt as well, and I wasn't really understanding, I guess, my own psychology. So it really got me curious, how does the mind really work, and why am I kind of okay? I'm not okay, but I can still tolerate and go out and perform, but why is my fellow band member hiding away and getting deeper and deeper into his own psychosis and the like? And I guess that kind of got me curious, and I just wanted to help people. But I guess at that point, I wasn't equipped. Now that I've been studying the mind and I've been a coach for many years, I think, as Mira said, we create our own reality. So, this, the burnout, the friction, all of the heat that you see in the industry or any creativity, any creative field, it's all self-made. We make that ourselves. Obviously, there's physical pressure, and you can have time pressure and people giving you deadlines and the like. But I can remember back, the label were quite forgiving, and it was actually just all in my own head. It was my own BS that was going on. And again, that's what got me curious, looking back at my roller coaster of a music career and thinking, well, what made me think that way? Why did I get into that situation? And crucially, what was the best way of helping someone get out of it? And as Mira said, I guess that the default thing is everyone's always okay. It's just a story we tell ourselves. And that story can get deeper and deeper. And I think one good thing that's crucial to remember is if you have people around you that you can talk with and get this out your head. And to be fair, at the time, I've always been very much theatrical. If I'm not in a good mood, I'll tell everyone, right? But my fellow band members were the complete opposite. They would hide away, and I just didn't realize what they were doing for 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, and they were missing like band practice. They weren't, doing as many gigs and the like. And when I caught up with them, they were destroying themselves, or they were really just feeling ashamed, and I guess they didn't want to reach out for help. And this article that you wrote, and some of the things that are now, mainstream in the media, it's really good that this is happening. And also, thank you for doing this, because the more that we talk about this, the more that it's just a normal thing, Humans are going to have, emotions, both good and bad. It's okay. And the more we just share that, the more it will be okay to handle, I guess.
Still, I think we just talked about this, especially I think in the electronic music scene, releases are put out on such a frequent level. How do you deal with that, and what do you tell your artists that you work with?
I mean, to be honest, it's not really the case for all the artists. There are people who are really just straight DJs and they don't produce music, or very rarely music. The bigger problem is all the rest that they're supposed to be doing, and you know, not having the time anymore to just do what they really want to do, be in the studio and do a track, it's kind of expected to have, like, I don't know, every 2 or 3 months some sort of content out there, but it doesn't necessarily, and that's maybe also what's a little bit of a shame, because it lost its value, what a release is. You know, before you produce something, it took you a long time. You know, you talked to your label, you had maybe an A&R who worked with you on the record and all that. Now you're in your studio, you do something, maybe you test it one time in the club and then it's out. If it doesn't work, doesn't matter. In 2 months you have another record, you know. And I think that's maybe a little bit the frustration part also for the artists, that, you know, you're constantly just putting something out, but the value decreased a little bit of what you're actually producing, and you don't even value it yourself anymore like this, maybe. I think the scenarios that you were describing, they existed already before digital age and before social media. I think people in the electronic or in the music scene, you know, sleep deprivation, alcohol, drugs, let's be honest, it was just not so public. And now, you know, you have somebody who has a burnout and who behaves really oddly at a performance, and then you're out there, and that's much more a problem nowadays than back in the days where it happened and you remove that person, and maybe he got help, maybe not, but he just disappeared, and to be honest, it wasn't even really much talked about it. The good and the bad thing now is that it's so out there that you have to talk about it, because you just can't ignore it. And you know, it is on YouTube, but it's going to be on Facebook, and fans are going to see it, media is going to see it, so you can't just not delete it and be like, okay, it never happened, let's put him in rehab, and that's it.
Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, I'm not sure if now artists release more music than before. It might not even be true, but I think because the production technology has gotten so much easier and everyone can afford now what before you said, you know, you needed a huge studio and whatever to even produce a track, and now basically you can do it on the flight on a laptop in like 90 minutes. So. And also, I guess we're moving away from albums, like you just said, and it's really more, of course, because we're also not pressing records anymore. So now with the digital, you can faster just release a track in between. So maybe the amount of albums and even maybe EPs is not necessarily more, but you just make something, it's not even maybe completely ready, and you just put it out there. Plus the amount of artists, just I feel it's gotten much more because the production technology is so much better. But I guess the biggest, like Noura said, the biggest problem is the lifetime of a record. Like you put it out, and basically, if no one talks about it for like 3 weeks, even if it's an album, then like forget about it, kind of just move on. Yeah.
So do you feel like there needs to be more awareness, and how could we raise more awareness for the topic itself?
Yeah, like we all said, we started to mention, it's just making it commonplace that, and this is even outside of the music industry or any creative industry for that matter, that if you're suffering, you can put your hand up. But as an artist, you know, you are going to go through, we've all talked about it, sleep deprivation, you know, you might get sucked into taking drugs, partying too hard, all of that. It's going to take its toll regardless of how much resilience and mental well-being, you know, you've got already. So just putting your hand up, and actually I think the crucial thing that could really help in the industry is just to see that, you know, if you're touring and you're out there and you're really busy, get a support structure around you, friends, family, fellow musicians. What saved me back in the day was just talking to people in my same studio space. I guess I was like the dad of the band back then, and you know, this was pre-coaching, but it really helped. And there was times when I was close to burnout and someone next door was like, had my back, took me for a drink, and I was close to tears one day, you know, and that really just was the difference between me going away and hiding away for weeks, I guess.
I think awareness is just the first step in a way, because I had the feeling when I was doing, like I was interviewing the NGO Help Musicians UK and also the Pop Ambulance, which they just opened this year, working with the Charité, like offering help for artists, especially for pop artists, because in classical music it's more established than it is like professional things you can do like for popular music. And the bottom line of most people I talk was like, yeah, there's not enough places where artists can actually find help and can go, because it takes so long to get like a space and like, I mean, it's great that there's now coaches that you can just contact directly. You don't have to go to a doctor and get an appointment and wait for 2 months until you can get a place for therapy and stuff like that. So I think it really needs to be there needs to be more opportunities for artists to actually go and find help.
You know, one thing I also wanted to mention, what we didn't touch on about, I guess that also plays into social media, is the whole comparison game. But I think that's a huge problem. And of course, social media is amplifying that a lot, that as people, we compare ourselves to others. And that's really, really unhealthy behavior. And I think especially with artists, you automatically do this. And the biggest crashes I've seen with artists is when they start comparing themselves. And on the other side, those who seem to be able to go quite stable for years, you know, with good mental health, are those who actually make the conscious decision not to compare themselves. And that also brings in much more creativity.
Anything else you would suggest artists, especially you guys that you've been on your way and had a change in your life? Anything that you would suggest an artist if they come to a point where they don't know how to move on?
I'll keep repeating this. Put your hand up, reach out to someone. Don't be scared to say that you're struggling. I know that might seem overly simplistic, but that's pretty much it. And all of the people around me who have suffered, even of late, another artist I spoke to, and I was really shocked that they didn't feel comfortable reaching out to even me or anyone around them. And that breaks my heart, really. And look at some of the recent deaths. You know, look at the guy from The Prodigy. That broke my heart because, again, there's a narrative with a lot, you know, people who were in the public eye, so that people knew there was something going on there. But again, it's just, it can be the difference between, you know, it getting really out of control. Just reaching out to someone and just sharing what's in your head is a massive plus, I think.
You know, we were talking about the awareness. But with awareness, we also need education. Then it's interesting that, you know, we learn about physics, we learn about anatomy, we learn about biology, but nobody talks about what it is, you know, what is your thinking, how your emotions are created, what are your emotions, what do you do with your impulsive thinking, how do you deal with stress? You know, we don't learn. And I think it's always a good time to start. So education of, you know, who we really are as humans, human beings, and how we create our experience, our thinking, our emotions is, you know, I mean, we still live in a world, and I think this is quite important to mention, where we think that our feelings are coming from the outside. You know, we live in a world of I'll be happy when narrative. And I'll be happy when will never happen. Because our feelings are not coming from our goal that we are achieved, from the amount of money that we will earn, from how popular we are going to be on the social media. They are created within ourselves. And once we learn that, we are then not a victim of the circumstance, not a victim of the judgment, but actually are in control of ourselves.
Yeah, just one more thought. You know, the problem also with artists putting their hand up often is that they almost feel ashamed that they are in such a good space. They have their dream job, they make good money. Who am I to complain? Who am I to say that I'm not well, that I'm suffering? I have everything. So many people would like to do what I do. I'm in no position to complain. Yeah, and I think we need to move away from that as audience, as observers, but also as artists. So I think this is a work that both need to do, that what you also noticed with the feedback in your article. They're also just humans and quite sensitive as well. And like you can't say someone's not allowed to experience a certain amount of pain, or just because compared to yourself, it doesn't seem so real.
I think that's a very nice words to end with our panel and open up for some questions from the audience, if there are questions.
Hi, it's kind of the follow-up question to what you just asked, because you were discussing everything from a very individual level of the artist, so people have to realize that something is wrong, they have to get a coach, or they have to do lots of yoga or whatever to even like be able to deal with the world they live in. But it seems that there are many outside influences that cause these issues. I mean, of course, some people just are predisposed for mental health issues, but in an ideal world, what do you think would have to change in this whole industry for people to cope without needing? I mean, it's great that you do your job, but people should not need you, actually.
So what I've seen recently that some management, so individual managers actually now start to focus more, rather than just thinking about the artist's career and the strategy and where they should play and why they should do that and, you know, the money they should make and whatever, actually to start support the artist as an artist and as a person. And I think that's a really, really good development, and I hope to see more of that in the future, where you actually support the creative, so maybe not playing the most amount of shows. Problem is that, of course, management and booking, they're all paid by a percentage, so they just want to, you know, ride that horse as fast as you can. But I'm hoping that just to have a more sustained career also and not burn people out so fast in the future.
Maybe actually we have to go even further, because the problem is, I mean, a lot of artists, at least in electronic music, not everybody has a management. You know, you have to have a certain status already to have a management. So basically you're on your own, you're struggling with money, and you just have to play the game. And unfortunately the game is, you play late at night, you play for many hours. The promoter expects you to party, you know, like, I mean, I have artists who decided that they don't want to drink anymore, they don't want to do drugs anymore. And it's sometimes even a reason they don't get booked, because they don't play the game anymore. So really, it starts about this whole perception about, you know, how a DJ has to perform and how he has to behave, and he has to come to the dinner with the promoter and he has to start drinking and do shots, and like, this is all part of the game. And I guess this is already where it needs to start, where the change has to happen. But then again, when I work with very young artists, they love this game. And if I tell them, yo, this is not gonna last for a long time like this, you're gonna hit rock bottom at some point. You're 25 now, you think you can do it for 20 years, you won't be able to do it. So I think young artists, they play this and they think they can do it for many years, and then at some point you reach a point where you realize you don't, and if you're serious about your career, you make changes, but they come at a price.
I just had another question, kind of similar to the one you answered. Let's say you're a band and you love touring, and I mean, for me, for instance, that's my point of view, and my dream was always to go on tour like basically every day of the year, every year. We love it, and so that's why we know we want to do that. And also all the bigger bands that I've seen or met that are doing this, how do you make sure that you can do this, as you said, in a sustainable way? For instance, I thought of no drinking on tour, obviously, because that means you're drinking every day otherwise. But what other tricks, when you see those bigger bands that travel, you know, not just in one country, but they're like, I mean, their inner clock is completely fucked, right? They don't even know when to sleep anymore, right? Because they're just constantly changing time zones. So how do they deal with that and remain mentally sane / doing this for a while? Like,
well, you know, because I was an agent for a long time also, and put tours together, and I found also just the way you're touring is really crucial. So putting the tour together, of course, again, you need to have a certain level to even be able to have that freedom and choice. But you can have a tour that's smooth, and, you know, you do like one country by another, for example, or just put it together in a way so you get your sleeping times, you get, you know, those downtimes that you need. Yeah, so I find the structure of the tour it can really be a make or break also. And then, I mean, I come from also a nutrition background, but I find what you eat and what you drink is so important also, so to put some emphasis on that. Because shit food is not going to be good fuel, and it's just going to make you go down really fast. Yeah, and just being mindful about your schedule, just really taking the time, and then not sitting in the bed and doing social media, but actually, you know, taking that nap. So it's all about being a bit more strategic with your time, I think, and getting maybe some external help to get some extra tips in there, yeah.
I just wanted to add, because maybe you should really check out the homepage of Help Musicians UK, because they started this kind of initiative about mindfulness on touring. It's called Do It Differently, I think. It's a project they just started, and maybe you can find it on the homepage. They have this kind of guideline to do it. Yeah, I think they're really thinking about this as well.
Hi. I thought about this problem a lot, especially when I read Laura's article, and we talked about playing the game, and I kind of made the observation that this problem is, we can trace it back way back in time. Like, we have this image of artists in pain. We can read it in writings about Beethoven. We have Van Gogh, who is like the archetype figure of this artist in pain, this jazz musicians in the 40s. And do you think that we kind of transform artists into a catharsis for us, so they can go through pain, so we don't have to go through it? And that is a perception of art that goes way back into a society, not thinking about art, that we have to challenge this before we can talk about like industry or suffering in the industry, that this image of artists we have to challenge.
No, I mean, I thought that as an artist for many years, you know, I had to be this cliched. I must make my life a lot shitter by, you know, having less sleep, taking more drugs, and then guess what happened? It was a complete shit show, right? But then I realized that it was a simple misunderstanding. And yeah, it is a very mainstream thing that's, you know, even now, as we've progressed as humans, technology's got better. And as Mira said, in terms of our own psychology, we're only scratching the surface, right? So, yeah, it needs to be taken out of the equation. And you can't force that, so you can't go around getting all evangelical and saying, oh, you can't do this. But I guess the more artists who people look up to, especially for young people to see, that A, the sharing about their own psychology while they're on tour, while they're making music, you know, because we're sharing a lot on social media, right? What we're having for breakfast, look at me, I've just got up, look at my new hat, all of this rubbish. But I think what would be really useful is, I've burnt myself a bit. Crucially, I'm going to this gig tomorrow and I'm going to take my foot off the gas. I'm going to have a chat with my tour manager, stuff like that. As a young person, I'd be like, okay, maybe I don't need to follow that route. And I guess until, I wouldn't say it's a mindset change, but when people realize that it doesn't make sense, what do you think happens? You know, they start to shift and they start to do what makes sense to them, right? So the more artists, and I see this a lot now, you know, I speak to artists in Berlin and they're all hardcore vegans. They don't drink, they don't take drugs. But crucially, I guess the tricky bit is, as we've all mentioned, you kind of need to be at a certain level before you can have the luxury of being looked after, getting a rider and all that. And, you know, as you mentioned before, in terms of starting out, me too.
And usually they're over 40 and did all the mistakes, and that's why they're now
we
changing,
talked about,
you know, it's like...
Yeah, and to be honest, you have to fail, right? You have to learn for yourself. There's no good me, you know, saying this stuff to my blue in my face. So you have to learn yourself, right? But you will self-correct. And although I agree that, you know, as an artist, you are, or I used to view myself as quite frail, it's amazing what human resilience is like and what you've got in the tank once you start to realize that stuff doesn't make sense, right?
All right. Thank you, everyone. I think we should now put on some music, finish the pizza and the beer, and just network a little bit. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for listening to our panel. As we saw, digitization might be one of the triggers that lead to mental health issues, but it's definitely not just the only issue that we have in the creative industries. More awareness needs to be raised, and much more needs to be done to help people with mental issues. If you're suffering from mental health issues, you can call the helpline 0800 111 0111 24/7. A big thanks also to Melodrive for producing our jingle.
Hello, audio by the venue Berlin.